Is that me or you, Lenny? Okay. The items listed on the CIP are not approved until funds are appropriated and approved by town council during the annual budget process. Projects listed on the CIP are not used as a basis for calculation of the impact fee rates. So in other words, the items added or subtracted to the CIP will not impact the proposed impact fee rates. The impact fee rates are based on new development, both residential and non-residential, the cost to serve the new development, and the rate growth for the community. And last but not least, if an item is not listed on the CIP, it cannot be funded with impact fees. So before we go through, it's not working here. I'll just mention this before we go through the departments. Oh, there we go. Am I controlling this or is Madeline?
Now you're
okay. We won't be too far. Okay. All right, so before we go into the individual departments, I just wanted to point out a couple of things. This is the version of the CIP that was adopted by the Planning Commission. We didn't want to make any alterations to the plan that was actually passed by the Planning Commission. We do know there are some items in here that we need to revisit, but wanted to get your input before staff went back to the table and made those changes. So where you're seeing funding source, where it's listed as general fund, that doesn't necessarily mean general fund, but it basically just means non-impact fees. And any items that you see crossed off, those items have either been completed or those items have been purchased. So I guess I don't know the best way to go through this with you all. If you just want to go through department by department, line by line, or if you all have had a chance to look at this over the weekend, if you have any specific questions, we have our department heads here who are available to answer any questions about any specific projects you have that they have on the list. And we also actually have Jonathan Guy here. He is with Kimley Horn, and he's the one that has prepared the impact fee study. Is there any particular?
Let me ask you one question. When you look at the Woodlands property uptown, and 2023, so we're expecting in the next couple of years some building activity over there.
Yes, so the 100,000 that we had there for the Woodlands property, it's my understanding that that was put in there for a master plan. So that would cover the master plan only. Is Amy here? Yes. And then, of course, whatever comes out of that master plan, then we would have to, of course, we would add later those items to the CIP, whatever comes out of that master plan.
So it's basically futuristic look that we're not in a position right now.
That's correct.
When, if we look at the Woodlands property as an example, when would we be deciding, I guess, the end of next year?
So what we
To spend, the reason I'm asking is to spend those funds when we really haven't decided what to do with the property in general, whether to keep it, whether to develop it, whether to sell it, to develop it. It seems to me to be looking at a parks and rec plan for the whole property, but before council has made a decision on what is it, how do we want to go forward with the property, might be getting the cart before the horse is all I'm asking.
So when we start working on next year's budget, which hopefully will be starting around in April. What we will more than likely do is refer to this capital improvement plan once it's adopted by council. Those items that are listed in 2023 will be items that we would then bring back to you all for consideration to appropriate funds in the upcoming budget. So that's going to be the time that we can have this discussion. Are we ready to move forward with a master plan for Woodlands or not? And if we're not, we can always push that up to 2024.
Okay, so when the funds would be appropriated for the year that's beginning July 1,
Yes.
is that not 2022?
No, that would be 23. We're in 22 now. So the items that you're seeing on the 2022 list,
Or 21, okay, we're 21, 22. So that 22, 23.
right.
Okay.
Right. I know the change in our
You'll get used to,
fiscal year is,
Fiscal year.
yeah.
Right.
So I can just continue to flip through these, and if there's anything you
Can we
see-
get,
Pardon me.
I'm just interested, skate park, 600,000. That's coming up fairly quick. Where's that?
The instructions I was given that if it was something that, potentially we were looking to do, to go ahead and include it. Because if it wasn't on the list, we couldn't use the impact fee. So we would be better to include it, and then down the line, if we wanted to push it back, that was fine. Or if we decided not to do it, that was fine, but it'd be better to throw everything on that list of potential projects that we were interested in pursuing.
So
Put out the wish list and needs and wish list, and then figure out how we're going to deal with it. Okay, thanks.
Just because it's on the CIP does not commit you to do it.
I have a question. The Sawmill Branch Park Bridge, is that something to be built or is something to improve on? And where is
Amy,
that?
do you want to come on up to the, there, since you've got several slides here?
That would be if we get to the point where we're able to extend the Sawmill Branch Trail down to Dorchester Road. There's a section that we would have to build a bridge.
Okay. Any other questions on this page?
Let me ask you another one. I saw you had on there about the improvement of the tennis courts this year. I know we've been talking about that for a while on Doty Park. What could you do with $39,000?
So not all of the projects that I have for 2022 were either funded or was enough to cover the projects in its entirety. That was for resurfacing of the courts themselves. So that project is not happening in this current budget cycle.
Okay, so you just have, that's basically on cover resurfacing.
Sorry?
That's basically for resurfacing.
It was, yes.
All right, thank you.
And the items that are lined out, are those things that we had already purchased?
They are, and I'm not sure why the lines are not showing up on the screen. But for example, on this page, yes, the gas gator.
I think
is
we're on
this
the right
page. There we are. Okay, the Toro Sand Pro Groomer, zero turn mower, the gas gator, and the crew cab pickup. Those were all purchased through the lease purchase proceeds that we did earlier, well, late last year. Does anybody have any other questions for Amy? No? Okay, so moving on to the streets department, same situation with the wheel loader and the debris truck. Both of those items were already purchased this year through the lease purchase proceeds. He's pretty easy. He just replaces heavy equipment. Couple pieces a year, 2 or 3 pieces a year. Anybody have questions on streets? All right, municipal court, we've got $3 million in there plugged in for 2024. I guess I should point out that just because it's listed in 2024, if council chose to do something in 2023, you're not obligated to stick to this time frame. It's just on the CIP. And for it to be eligible for impact fees, again, it has to be an eligible expense, and it just has to be on the CIP. Any
So,
questions?
so
about-
by 2024, inflation would have popped that up quite a bit, I guess, if we waited. Probably if we would do what we're going to do with the municipal court facility early, it would help save cost of inflationary cost.
Yes, sir. Engineering department. One comment I would like to add about engineering department, and I spoke to Russ about this, about the possibility of adding a line here for underground utilities, similar to what we've got here for sidewalk construction. We just basically have an annual allocation or try to have an annual allocation for sidewalk construction, that perhaps we could add something in there for underground utilities.
I would agree with that.
And also, I know in the past, we were trying to at least do a new intersection mast arms, one a year or something. And I know that we kind of held back on that, but that might be something that we would want to put back on there in case we wanted to put any money towards it.
Okay.
Future.
I just wonder, Russ, as a comparison, how much did you allocate and spend on sidewalks in 2021? Zero? Okay.
So what happened in that scenario, obviously we've got $350,000 on our CIP, but from the CIP to the actual budget,
Mhm.
there was zero.
Gotcha.
So any questions for Russ? Or other Russ? Russ Cordell, I'm gonna have to get used to that. Admin department. The council chamber AV upgrades have already been completed. Any questions on admin? Nope. Stormwater department, we have purchased the equipment that was slated for 2022. We've got a pretty big ticket item plugged in for 2023. Any questions for stormwater? Okay, police and communications. The items you see crossed out are things that we have already purchased or completed this year. One thing I do want to point out under, for example, the first line there where we've got fleet replacement for the little over $1 million. Funding source impact fees. When we go back through and make any corrections and any recommendations you all give us today, that's going to be corrected because the vehicles cannot be paid for with impact fees. So just wanted to point that out. Any questions for police? No? Okay. Fire department, we just replaced engine 303, and I believe we do have that in service now. Not yet. Just ordered it. Okay. Okay. Okay.
They're about a year and a half out.
Okay. Any questions for the fire department? Y'all are being quiet this afternoon. I'm just waiting for the hammer.
Station 7 is where?
Talking about over the next area.
The next one? Okay.
Okay, maintenance department. Anybody got questions for maintenance? No? All right, these are the overall totals. Obviously, we don't typically have an extra $16 million when we work on our budget. So all of the items that you see listed are obviously not going to be funded. But that's when we get into the budget process, and that's when council goes through and determines what they want to have included, or what you all want to have included in the budget. So before we go into the impact fee study portion of it, is there anything else you want staff to do to tidy up this CIP? Anything else you want us to look at? This is something that will have to be approved by ordinance by city council. So if there's anything else you want us to work on.
Lisa, I think the only thing I would say is that it might be helpful before we get the ordinance to have a clear understanding of what is eligible to spend impact fees on. I mean, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, if as far as the CIP, it's a wish list. Doesn't obligate us to do one thing. We could do all of these, one of these, 0 of these things. But if at some point we want to use impact fees to do something, it's got to be eligible, but it's also got to be on this list or we can't do it. So, I mean, I mean, this list could be 5 times as long as this. Things that I would never, ever vote for. But if they're eligible and you can conceive of it, throw it on there. But the real question is, what are we going to do with impact fees? So I guess that's the next part of this workshop.
Okay. All right, well, let's jump into the impact fee study. So since the last report that you all got last month, council requested that the 2021 numbers be included in that report. So the latest report that you got on Friday does include all of the 2021 numbers. So that has been updated. To hopefully answer your question, Mr. McIntosh, what impact fees can be used for are design and engineering costs, right-of-way acquisition, construction costs, any purchases over $100,000, utility relocation, and project financing. And what impact fees cannot be used for is maintenance for any of our facilities, administrative costs, operational expenses, or existing deficiencies.
So I do have a question now.
Okay.
We've worked with Dominion, had a little pilot program, I think Rutherford Street, I might have the wrong street, to work with Dominion to put utilities underground. Dominion pays part, we pay part, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Based on this presentation, or putting utilities underground, is that something impact fees can be used for? I think it ought to be on the list.
Okay.
I mean, we may never do it, but we can't do it
Right, if it's not on the list. So I agree. All right, so I've got a note to add underground utilities and a note to add mast arms for under engineering. So just a couple other points for the impact fees. All revenues collected are to be maintained in an interest-bearing account. Any monies collected must be spent within 3 years of the scheduled date of construction within the CIP. And there is an annual monitoring report generated and a comprehensive review and update. We must do that every 5 years, and that's actually what we're doing right now. And new projects and all maximum allowable fee changes require an updated study. So with that, as I said, we have Jonathan Guy from Kimley Horn here. He is actually the author of the impact fee study that you all received on Friday. He's available if you have any specific questions about the study. That also has to be, is required to be adopted by ordinance.
Well, I have a question for you then. If
Okay.
we're required to adopt the study as part of ordinance, does adopting the study in any way obligate us to do anything that's in the study?
So what we did, we also sent you on Friday this impact fee worksheet. And I think Madeline, if you could pull that up for me. So our discount rates that we currently have are 30% for fire, 80% for parks, and 0 for municipal. When you all adopted the first impact fees, that was what the discount rate was. When you all revisited this, I guess it was probably back in 2015, 2016, you all kept the same discount rates. So there wasn't, you all didn't make any changes to it. So it's going to depend on whether you want to amend these current discount rates that you have now.
Remind me whether it was 2015 or 2016, remind all of us what we did when we revisited impact fees. If we kept the discount rates the same, did we make any changes in 2015 or 2016, whenever it was?
In 2015, we adopted the new impact fee study, which gave a different maximum total allowable, but you kept the same discount rates.
So the fees adjusted accordingly?
Correct. Although based on the calculations at that time, it was a very minor adjustment.
And what year were impact fees initially adopted by
Well-
council that predated me?
Honestly, they were initially adopted in 2003.
Okay.
And then in 2010, we did our first major update and adopted these rates. It was still pretty similar to what was initially adopted in 2003, but slightly different. And then in 2015, like I said, we updated the study to a different maximum allowable rate, maximum allowable amount, kept the same rates. So it adjusted slightly. This time with the growth that we've had and everything, and the way our calls have changed kind of between residential and commercial, the maximum allowable rate, as you probably saw, has increased pretty significantly for residential. So that's why we kind of gave you the worksheet to play with to see how you wanted to handle. But in order to keep the impact fees, we do have to update it every 5 years, or we at least have to start the update every 5 years. And
I don't know who my question is for, because I think, obviously members of the public here, there perhaps people watching live streaming. We've been working with this for a while, and I'm not really sure why we use the term maximum. What is the term?
maximum allowable amount, basically.
Yeah.
is what it-
Maximum allowable amount. That's the tax, correct?
So the maximum allowable amount is based on, I mean, Jonathan will probably speak to it better than I can, but it's based on the legislation and state law that specifies how you do the impact fee study, what you include. You do a certain amount per person and then,
And it
So-
just like state law caps us on millage increases. Based on certain factors, we have a maximum amount each year we can increase our millage, our property tax millage, but we don't have to increase it at all. Is this the same thing?
yes, you choose what your discount rate is. So if you want to keep it the same, our impact fees the same as they are now, you don't have to increase. I think we do have to go with the new study, correct me if I'm wrong. We have to adopt the new study, but you can play with the rates so that you don't end up increasing the actual overall impact fees, if that's what your goal is, to not increase the impact fees.
I don't know that there's a way to keep it exact though. So for example, if you go in here under fire protection and, you know, discounted that to 80, if you can play with that for me, Madeline. And then, and you see how it adjusts the numbers, you're still looking at the proposed, you see the column with the current fees and then you see the proposed fees. So, and then if you went in under municipal facilities and did like a 50%. But some of that, they're not all gonna always be exactly the same. I mean, you could try to get it close.
I'm struggling with this, that this can possibly be the law, but maybe y'all can straighten me out. Are we allowed to amend the study to have it say what we want it to say as opposed to an outside consultant? Or if we hire a consultant, our consultant sets our tax rates for our citizens? That doesn't seem like an actual law to me.
And Jonathan, if you can, if you can come help, I think it's my understanding it's based on certain metrics that he can explain to you.
Councilman McIntyre, great questions about this. We're not setting any tax rates for this. What we do is go in and calculate the maximum allowable based off the metrics that are there today. And it's a variety of different things. It's your population, it's the number of fire calls. It's based off the 10th edition of trip generation with how development generates trips, which is how it all feeds into that. If you choose to set your impact fees based off the current one, you will adjust the discount down to that point. You could set it based off the study to 0 if you choose to, or 10% of the maximum. You have complete autonomy and authority to do that. All the legislation does is says, if you're going to impose impact fees, you must do the following. And it must be following this prescribed approach. That's it. When it comes to the fees, council determines really what you want to charge. That's it.
And what that does is to prevent municipalities from just grabbing a number out of the sky that could be extraordinarily high with no justification. And the purpose of having you come in and do this study is to tell us anything above this is impermissible.
Absolutely. And so it just gives you guidelines to work within, and that's it.
Let me ask you something, since like we're in a very fast growing area right now, Tri-County area, and developers are developing all over the Tri-County area. Would it behoove the town to think in terms of being competitive with other developers so that we can still attract people to come here and build?
That's a decision council has to make. Obviously, growth comes as a double-edged sword. It's good, but there's also impacts associated with that. And so while you can, you have to balance the two. I think you have to be able to provide infrastructure that the citizenry wants and needs so that it is a quality of life for the community. But you also don't want to be so onerous that you drive all development out of communities like some communities in the Tri-County area are trying to do.
One of the things that's attractive about some of it when people talk about it is the fact that our taxes are moderate. And so I think it's very important to growth. Yeah. And this is basically a tax. Thank you.
Next questions. I'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, one thing I'd like to say, and I think where we ought to start, and I know we got to go through the study and all that, is it where we are now? And talk about where we're gonna raise the impact fees. And by the way, I'm in favor of raising the impact fees, and I'll tell you why in a second. We start from where we are now rather than from zero because it sounds better. We have reached a point in Somerville where we're so far behind on our infrastructure and equipment and the things that you saw previously that our people need to do their job, that it hurts some days. And if you don't believe it, just come sit in my office with me and listen to the phone calls I get and the people that I talk to when I'm not here. And when I talk to the guys who are out there in the trenches doing the work, we can't continue doing this on our operating budget that we're getting ready to work on for next year. So impact fees, you know, we had a $2,500 impact fee that we were paying Dorchester County. The builders were, people like me. But every time I came into City Hall here, I went in the county to get a building permit, I paid a $2,500 impact fee. Nobody said anything. I didn't say anything. I just paid it and moved on. Well, that found out was illegal and we didn't have to pay that anymore. And anyway, $2,500 was a big jump just to get thrown on all the builders, especially independent builders. I look at it as we got to have help raising money. And I think the citizens in Somerville, the ones that really care about Somerville, like Aaron just said, Somerville's a great place to live. But if we continue doing what we're doing now, getting further and further behind on our infrastructure, the paving that Russ talks about, the flooding that I get calls about and emails about that I can let you read that I got yesterday, waiting on the next flood and their homes being hurt. Somerville's not going to be a nice place to live. It's going to be a bad place to live because Doug's not going to have the police officers he's going to need. Rich will be lacking the fire service. He just told you that he's needing. These are big numbers, guys, big numbers. And we could be lacking in our budget like we're finding out since Lisa came to work and Rhonda, where we were supposed to have stuff in our budget for raises for people that were promised. The money's not there. You know, we're falling behind, and I can tell you we've fallen behind. Now, if it's fat in it, then this council needs to get involved a little bit more and try to help find where the fat is. But in the meantime, we got to find other sources of revenue wherever we can find them. And I hate to put the burden on the taxpayer, but I'm not scared to. As long as I'm sitting in this mayor's position, I'm not scared to put the burden on the taxpayers because the good taxpayers who are demanding a better life, better roads, more drainage, and better infrastructure will back us. And if they don't, they can elect somebody that can do a better job. And that'll be fine too. But as long as we're here, I think we need to try to do the best we can possibly do for them. And one way are these impact fees. And I got some friends of mine that are really upset with me because of the way I feel about the impact fees. But right now, unless y'all got a better way you can come up with, let me know, because I don't know of one. That's my 2 cents worth as your mayor.
Just to clarify, Lisa, are we allowed to use impact fees for stormwater?
I think it depends. I know we can, does that matter if it's $100,000 or more, or is it just if we're doing engineering, those kinds of things are eligible?
$100,000 really is meant to apply rolling stock vehicles.
Okay.
So that you don't have, because those can be extremely expensive and required for extension service. New fire trucks, garbage trucks. That's really expensive.
Okay, so engineering, design, work for stormwater and actual construction of
You have
stormwater.
to be careful though, because it associates itself with existing deficiencies. Where it is, you may be able to pay for the engineering associated with that. but not just- It's a fine line there. What's the solution? So you have to review each of those.
Does that answer your question, Mr. McIntosh?
I think so.
Okay. So, do you all, do you all want to have some time to play around with the worksheets? Do you have recommended discount rates you want us to plug in? What,
The recommendation from planning council, from planning commission was to have no discounts. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And I think we talked about, I think the whole reason why we're having this workshop was when we asked last time what that would mean for, we say we're serious about affordable housing, but I don't know if we're serious about affordable housing. But the question was, what would the impact fee increase be for a $200,000 house? Although it's very few people are building $200,000 houses. And if I'm not mistaken, the increase was just exponential without a discount rate. Wasn't that correct?
Madeline, can you put 0 in all of the discount rates? We can tell you right now. So a $200,000 single family home with 0 discount or 0% discount would be $6,523.
And presently
It's $1,135.
it's basically a 600% tax rate without a discount. And I guess my concern is that we do give a lot of lip service to trying to keep housing in Somerville affordable. That other communities, to name one, Mount Pleasant, apparently has no interest in that. But the fee, the impact fee, no matter what the discount rate is, the impact fee is the same on a $200,000 house as it would be on an $800,000 house that, Mayor Waring or somebody might build. And the $800,000, the person paying Mayor Waring $800,000 to build a house can pay that $6,000. Person struggling to get into their first house, trying to find somebody that actually builds a stick-built house at $200,000, they can't pay that $6,000. And that's why I think that raising impact fees in any manner is a huge mistake.
I did want to point out that, yes, you are correct. The impact fee is the same no matter how much the house cost it is per dwelling unit. However, we do have something in our ordinance that does allow for impact fees to be waived for affordable housing. They just have to meet certain qualifications to actually be considered affordable housing.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Well, I've brought up affordable housing a number of times. I think this is, I was listening to what Bill just said. It makes sense to me because I think we have to make sure that people who live here and generations after them can afford to live here. So I think this is something we might take a closer look at some point.
I do think we all have a genuine concern about managing growth, limiting development, trying to prevent the types of developments that we don't want to see. I think that there are other mechanisms to do that. We just have to be willing as a council to take those votes, to deny rezonings, to deny annexations, and just hold the line on our votes. Right now, there are very few parcels left in the town of Somerville of any size that aren't already planned out. There's some large parcels in the town, but there's already been a PUD zoning for it. We know exactly how many houses are being built. If we want to stop or manage growth in Somerville, in the town of Somerville, then we as a council need to start making the tough votes and, not try to do it through the back door.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yeah, Bob.
I just like to say, one, I agree with Ricky, and we are falling behind. We have been for a long time. And not only do we need new roads, there's a lot of bad roads in town. Midland Parkway is getting to be almost a gravel road. And even the things that are just quality of life, like parks and recreation, the last survey that was given, 85% of the taxpayers said they would pay more taxes to have more opportunities for parks and recreation. And that was the taxpayers themselves. So I think we do owe it to our citizens to keep our town nice. And in some ways, you get what you pay for. If we cheap out on income, then we are going to have a cheap infrastructure. So I think something needs to go up. We need to pay for this somehow. And those creating the impact, to me, are the most likely ones to do it. Thank you.
If I listen to what everybody has said, I don't think there's any question, at least in my mind, that the needs for funds are there. I clearly understand what Mr. McIntosh is saying with regards to lower income housing and the more onerous impact of an impact fee on that housing. At the same time, it costs an equal amount, if not more, to serve that lower income housing than it does higher income housing. But at the same time, it seems to me that in what we're listening to, that there's that doing nothing and doing everything are the two ends of the spectrum, and touching something in the middle where it could be doing everything at one end and doing nothing at another end, or something in between that is where we ought to be targeting what we're doing, because people are moving here for quality of life. And Somerville's a unique place. I'm not going to compare us to Mount Pleasant, because I don't think that's a fair comparison to us. This is a better place to live than Mount Pleasant.
I was
So,
going to say, I don't think it's fair to Mount Pleasant.
well, whichever side you want to look at it. But I think finding something that allows us to provide the quality of life, which includes all aspects of what we're looking at here, for the citizenry that is here and for the citizenry that's going to come. It is where we've got to find that balance. And again, where I started, I don't think it's zero, and it may not be 100, but it's something. And we're going to have to find some balance in my mind that allows us to have some increase, or the things that Ryan does, the things that Russ does, the things that we're trying to do with Amy, the things to do with roads and stormwater and parks. We're going to regress. We've made great strides, and we're at a point now with funds that we're going to be regressing if we don't do something. So, my 2 cents.
Lisa, I do have another question. We obviously have, as I stated before, while we don't have a lot of land in the town that's undeveloped, we have annexed a number of tracks that have been zoned PUDs. I mean, they're out there, the Hoyer tract, Salisbury Farm to include the Rosemary tract, Tupper's Farm, what we call the Knightsville PUD. I mean, that between those, I mean, I don't know the number of houses that are going to be built, but we're at 52,000 now. I would assume that a build out of everything that's been approved, ones that I just listed, would get us at least to 60,000 in the next 10 years. So at some point, I guess I have a statement and a question. At some point, we as a council have to decide. We want to be, we've already decided whether we knew it or not, that we were going to be a town of 60,000. Do we want to be a town of 75,000? Do we want to be a town of 100,000? I don't want to do that. I want Somerville to have 100,000 people. That's not Somerville in my mind. So my question is, for those PUDs that I just named that we've already approved, are we able to increase impact fees on them, or is that already locked in a development agreement?
Yeah, I'm almost positive, at least the last two,
Yeah.
we had some language.
Most of the PUDs we've approved do not have a development agreement. And in that case, it would go with the most recently adopted development impact fee.
At the time they pull the building permit?
Correct.
Okay.
For those that we recently adopted that do have the development agreements, we made sure we put language in those development agreements that they would use the most recently adopted rate for impact fees.
At the time that they pull building permits?
Correct.
I guess maybe one more question that I'm asking Councilman McIntosh to at least clarify something for me for how I view it. You know, I grew up here as well, and you know, so when I grew up, it's 2,300 people or something like that, and we're 52,000 people now, and I too don't want it to be 100,000 people ideally, but it's going to be 100,000 people. It's whether or not it's in the town of Somerville, or whether it's in the town of Somerville and Dorchester County. And I'm not sure I'm wise enough to know what is the better of those two things. I know that we control our destiny if we're bringing land into the town of Somerville to be developed. If we don't bring the land in and it's going to be developed into Dorchester County, those same 500 homes are going to be built on, or have, or many they are on 165, going out past Ashley Ridge or going down 78. They're going to be there. So it seems to me that there's a balance between what is it that we would like to have control over and the numbers be damned, or we don't have control over it and we're damned by the numbers. So I mean, that's just my concern as to what is 100,000, is as distasteful as the number is to me.
If I may just jump in, not understanding the full history of the impact fees in Somerville and not being with this body for a long period of time, I do want to consider what the permanent solution is. So obviously, we have the needs right now in front of us. There's no doubt about that. But long-term, are we working forward to a permanent solution? Is that diversifying our tax base? Is that economic development? And then make sure these temporary tweaks don't prevent us from still working towards our permanent solution. So, I don't have a clear picture as to what our, planning horizon needs to be to get to where we have an actual real solution. It looks like you may have an idea.
I don't know. I will say this, Councilman Touchberry, welcome. It's probably appropriate then that you're sitting in the seat that you're sitting, because at least on a quarterly basis, Councilman Bailey would kind of lecture us on land use and what our mistakes have been. It's a lot easier to it's a lot easier to, hindsight's a lot easier than vision. And it's, going back and trying not to repeat the past. But the biggest mistake I would say that the town and the county has made is not much more aggressively pursuing and setting aside land for commercial, industrial, economic development, and simply just approving wide swaths of land for cookie cutter development by national tract builders. And I agree with Councilman Jenkins to this extent. I think some of the annexations that I listed earlier were ones that I supported, and I supported primarily because of the location. I think about Salisbury Farm and to include the Rosemary Tract. That's just a key piece of property that was always going to be developed. It's a gateway to our town. I wanted that to be, I considered that part of town of Somerville, even though it's right down North Maple Street, even though it was not incorporated in the town limits. But the last thing I'd want us to do would be to go down 165, to go down Royal Road, to appease national tract builders because they can't get what they want from either Dorchester or Berkeley County. I'm really very happy with the parameters of our municipal limits. I know we have a lot of donut holes, and I know it's very inefficient. But the idea of annexing to extend our limits for residential development just, sounds like a terrible idea. And if Councilman Bailey were still with us, he would remind us of that.
And if I could speak, Bill, I agree with you 100%, except for the fact if that residential gets built in our area, we still have to provide the roads, the parks for those people that are not citizens of Somerville and don't pay for it. And I don't know of a way around that. And yes, I don't want the national tracts and all this large residential. And maybe impact fees is a way of moving that a little bit and upgrading the quality. If we look at what is being built in and around Somerville, Nexton, probably the best example, it is high quality. High quality costs money. And we need our infrastructure to match what the developers are doing. If we want housing that's completely affordable, we may chase a lot of the high quality development away. And Jesse already said there is a mechanism within the impact fees to protect the low income housing. And that would be up to us to decide what is low income housing. And I think that's where we need to go. We have to do something. We have to pay for this infrastructure, be it in Berkeley, Dorchester. Even growth in Charleston comes up and down Dorchester Road and I-26 and all of our arteries, because we are the only way out of the beach. And somehow we have to do that. Thanks.
And by the way, I wasn't talking about a $2,500 impact fee a while ago. When I mentioned the $2,500, I do want y'all to know that. I said I was in favor of an impact fee starting off with where we are now and going up, but certainly not $2,500. I was talking about a decent impact fee that would help us. But when we get around to talking about the number, we can discuss that then. But $2,500 was just something I'd mentioned because that's what we were paying on for Dorchester County 2, District 2. But that's not a number that I had in mind. I think that's entirely too high. And that wasn't something that I had in mind. That was just something I mentioned that we were paying. That was a big number on top of impact fees that we were paying at that time. But when we sit down to discuss the amount, that's when we can talk about that. I certainly wouldn't want to do anything to hurt our economic development. Slowing down the residential, I don't think that'll hurt us a bit. But I don't want to do anything to hurt the economic development in town. We need to do something to enhance that. But I just wanted to add that.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and I think that what the Planning Commission has suggested that we do is go from single family residential to go from $600 to $6,000, and I just think that's untenable. I assume there's a number that we can reach a consensus on, but for me to vote for it, it's going to have to be a whole lot closer to 600 than 6,000.
The current rate is 1135.
Yeah.
Oh, 1,100 to
Okay.
6,000, 6 times, right?
Okay.
The max is only 5 times that,
Yeah.
not 6.
Well, you know, if we want to increase it from 1,100 to 1,250, you probably got my vote. Supposed to be kind of a joke, but
Well,
And one thing just to point, I did just want to point out, the discount rate has to be the same no matter whether it's residential, commercial, whatever it is. Once you choose that discount rate, it applies to all of the categories. So, but the one way to differentiate, I guess, between residential and commercial, if you want to not possibly impact economic development, is your parks and recreation fee does not apply to commercial properties. It only applies to residential properties.
I must have misunderstood. I thought that earlier we were given our present discount rates and that they did differ between commercial and residential. Currently, we have the same discount rate for everything.
Yeah, everything, it's the same for all, like your parks and recreation has the same discount rate, but it doesn't apply to commercial.
Okay.
Your fire protection has the same discount rate no matter what the use is. You can't change the discount rate per the use. You choose one discount rate. So that's why we gave you this worksheet to kind of play with and see how changing those discount rates would affect each use and residential versus commercial and different types of commercial, that sort of thing. So we cannot choose, one discount rate for this use and one discount rate for this use. And one, it has to be the same discount rate for every use, but you can choose a different discount rate for Parks and Rec than you choose from fire protection than you choose from municipal, but you can't choose it for each.
commercial versus residential.
Or
For
just-
example, if you look under Parks and Recreation, you'll notice that under hotel motel, there aren't any fees in there. Because they only apply to residential.
But yeah, that pink, the little pink square, you
Yeah.
can only choose one
Wrap it up.
actual discount rate for that.
Well,
I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay.
just from my take on it, I was sort of joking when I said I could support an increase from 1,100 to 1,250. Might not be able to go that high. Well, that was a joke too. But I think what our constituents and our voters and our taxpayers elect us to do and to vote for us to do is to set tax rates, not discount rates. So what I would suggest going forward is that this council make a decision as to the amount that we think is a fair and equitable amount to be placed on, because it's a pass through, right? I mean, it's just a pass through. The builders just adding it. What's a fair and equitable amount to add to a single family residence, knowing that you're adding it the same thing to a $200,000 residence that you are to $1 million residence? And we do have some new construction getting close to that in the town in a few places. And that we set that amount and we trust staff and their expertise to come up with whatever that discount rate. Discount rate might be 79.6789, but we set the amount of the tax and let our staff determine what the discount rate is to get there. That would be my suggestion.
Mr. Mayor, I know that we have to start with our standing committee meetings. We do have on the Finance Committee agenda a period of time on there to continue this discussion. If we want to go ahead and start the standing committee meetings.
Okay, we'll have to adjourn our meeting and at this time, I'll call the finance